We've got to clean up an injustice. A legal rule that allows claims made by anonymous people to destroy the lives of innocent men and no consequences. Actor John Jarratt is just the latest example. 2 weeks ago, a jury found that Jarratt, the star of Wolf Creek, found him not guilty of raping a woman at his home more than 40 years ago. Now, that woman, whose name is still suppressed, had been living at the time with Jarratt and his wife. And Jarratt admits, yes, they had sex, but it was consensual, and some years later he confessed that to his wife. As for the alleged victim, she did not go to the police. She said nothing at the time because she didn't want to damage Jarratt's marriage. But the jury, it found the woman's allegations were not established, not beyond reasonable doubt. So Jarratt is an innocent man. Except, of course, Jarratt is also a much poorer one. He had to pay a lot to defend himself. And he says, and in the meantime, acting jobs dried up, certainly after those allegations against him became public. And is also an angry man, angry that he was publicly shamed, despite being innocent, while his accuser, even today, cannot be named.
I happen to be well known, which makes it a million times worse. The person who is the perpetrator of an evil lie walks away scot-free with a suppression order.
It's Bettina Arndt. Bettina, thank you so much indeed for your time. John Jarratt was found not guilty of raping someone more than 40 years ago, but his accuser still cannot be named. Does that strike you as fair?
It's certainly not fair. I mean, in naming the accuser, not the accuser, we're taking sides. We're believing the victim. And, I think it's an extraordinary distortion of what most people would regard as normal justice. I mean, look at the consequence for Jarratt in terms of his career. He was really doing well in his career after years of effort, and that's been totally derailed. He faces enormous costs. She had the public prosecutors acting for her, taxpayers' expense, and her anonymity is preserved. I just think this is a real distortion of what most of us feel would be appropriate in this case.
Well, Bettina, I'm not in favour of censorship, but I'm still going to ask this. It's Jarratt's suggestion that, should allegations against him and people like him be kept confidential until the end of a court process?
I certainly think that would be a good idea, particularly with prominent men, well-known men like him, who suffer enormous damage to their reputations. But it's also true of ordinary blokes, of course. I could give you half a dozen cases of people who are talking to me right now, including a mum I was talking to. I'm going to actually be interviewing her next week, whose 18-year-old son was accused, and then the case fell apart. The police decided it didn't stand up, and that boy suffered enormous damage as a result of the impact of that, the rumour around that particular case. And there's been no consequences for the woman concerned. I mean, it's really problematic what's happening here. You might remember, Andrew, we talked before about Sarah Jane Parkinson, a woman who was sent to jail in Canberra earlier this year as a result of making false rape accusations. And that case got enormous publicity because it's so rare that women actually get publicly named and suffer any consequence. In her case, she went to jail for 3 years. She's now applying for early parole, which will astonish some people. But she, it cost that family, trying to protect their son that she'd accused, it cost them well over $300,000. The young man went to jail for 4 months. I mean, enormously damaging case for the family that she'd accused. And
I think what you're touching on here is something that I think you've talked about in the past too, that at least perhaps there's a cultural response we need to shift here, that an allegation is always an allegation, and we should resist the calls that we've had lately that, if a woman makes an allegation, she must be believed, or if a victim of, even an abusive priest makes a victim makes an allegation, you still need to test the allegations. You cannot take anyone's word at face value without a proper process. But listen, the Me Too movement, you had Tracy Spicer getting involved and telling Jarratt's accuser to go to the police. Now, in my view, totally appropriate. She also called the woman brave, and that to me implied that the woman's story, at least in her mind, was true, and that was put out there. But to your mind, was there anything that Spicer did that was wrong?
Look, I have a real problem with eliciting accusations. I mean, as you say, there are some cases where, you know, where you might want to encourage other people to come forward when someone's, you know, there's a lot of evidence already, particularly like the Weinstein case or, you know, a number of other prominent examples like that. But it's also very easy for this sort of thing to turn into a witch hunt. I recently made a YouTube video with a guy who's a musician who teaches music in schools, and he had an accusation from a student, and it was investigated by police. But in the meantime, there was this social media campaign against him, naming him as a pederast, more accusation. You know, they elicited more accusation to come forward. It was all investigated. Docs, Department of Community Services and the police found that the accusations didn't stand up. But he's still not allowed to teach in New South Wales schools. I mean, the damage to someone's reputation of this sort of witch hunt is just enormous. And it's happening all the time.
Well, just again, another little learning point there. The plural of allegation is not proof. Finally, I note, Bettina, that while John Jarratt had to endure, what is it, the best part of 2 years of terrible, you know, gossip about him and news about him and all that, I know that Tracy Spicer has now chosen just now to tweet that she's very excited to announce she's taking an 8-week break from social media, which comes obviously just after the collapse of the case here. Smart decision by her?
Oh, I hope it's a permanent withdrawal. I mean, I do really worry, as I say, about this eliciting these sorts of complaints and the witch hunt that can result from that. And I think it's a really good thing that some of these big cases are collapsing now. And I hope that it'll give our media a pause when it comes to using these sort of accusations to accuse men publicly when there's no proof until they're properly investigated and go to court.
Bettina, you've been telling us about this for some time, warning about this. Bettina Arndt, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks everybody for supporting me on my YouTube channel. I've got growing numbers of subscribers, which is really exciting. If you'd like to support me financially, go to my donate page on my website. Thanks a lot.